Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are we all doing today? Baruch Hashem. We are here, ready to start tonight's lesson on karpas, a lesson on dealing with life. Um, we're not going to focus so much on the salty part, although that's the title. We will talk about it. We're going to talk about karpas. What are we middle of doing? We're in the middle of a series that is going through the Seder in a methodical Seder, in order, trying to understand the different parts of our Seder experience and what they mean for us. So we've already explained Kiddush. We spoke at great length about the idea of sanctifying your mind and putting yourself into a sacred space and getting into the focus. The next step of the Seder experience after a person makes Kiddush is Urchatz. Urchatz is where we wash our hands and we get ready not to eat bread as we normally would on a holiday or on a Friday night. After we make Kiddush, what do we normally do? We wash our hands for Hamotzi and we enjoy. But tonight, or at the Seder night, we wash our hands not for Hamotzi, we wash our hands for the vegetable that we're going to eat called karpas. So let me explain this first of all. It's actually fascinating. It's fascinating because most people don't know this, but in Jewish law, there's actually a concept of washing your hands before you eat any food that is wet from liquid. And today, in ancient times, that might have sounded very extreme, but in today's hypersensitive to germ-sensitive environment where everyone's so afraid of catching any germs and touching anything that somebody else touched, and we're sterilizing all the doorknobs and we're washing our hands multiple times a day, these laws of ritual purity actually make perfect sense. They make sense. So let me take a minute to explain it, and you'll appreciate the beauty of Torah that taught us a set of laws thousands of years ago, long, long before they had any kind of microscopes and any time they could look at things that weren't visible to the naked eye. In Judaism, in Halacha and Torah, we find many, many laws of ritual purity and impurity. Laws that if you find yourself in the same tent, in the same building as a dead person, that ritual impurity will transfer to you. It's airborne if you're in the same confined environment, even though you didn't touch the corpse. It's an amazing thing. So there's a halacha, there's a law as follows, that any food that is in contact with one of 7 liquids, which are wine, honey, oil, milk, dew, blood, or water, any one of these 7 liquids, and let's say a pickle, so it's a cucumber, but the pickle has sat in liquid, it's sat in water with salt or whatever it is, any food that's in wine or honey or oil, any of these things, that food, you must wash your hands before you touch the food, in case your hands have some ritual impurity that you're not familiar with. So you wash your hands to remove the ritual impurity before you go and touch the food, because if you touch the food with the impurity on your hands, you will then transfer that impurity from your hands to the food. I mean, this would be boring stuff if not for the fact that we were living in the coronavirus environment. Good evening, everyone that's watching on Facebook and on YouTube. Thanks for watching. If not for the fact that we're living in an environment where everyone is so concerned about and so cognizant of the ability to transfer our germs, that if you don't wash your hands and then you touch a wet food that has been in contact with liquid, that you can then transfer your germs into the food, which can then be transferred to somebody else. Today we understand that idea very, very well. It's actually very, 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 very interesting. Anyway, that is the requirement to wash your hands. The hand washing is done the same way that we wash our hands today before bread, 3 times on the right and 3 times on the left. Your left, by the way, you switch 3 times, 3 times. You wipe them. However, you do not make a blessing al netilas yadayim as you normally would before eating the hamotzi. Today, many Jews, many religious Jews, are not careful to wash their hands before they touch food that was in the liquid. Obviously, by the way, if you're using a fork or something like that, you don't need to. It's only if you're going to use your hands. Which, by the way, is why for karpas we specifically use our hands to dip the vegetable in the water. Because if you're not using your hand, if you're using a fork, then you wouldn't have been required to wash your hands in the first place. So you take your hand, you dip the vegetable in the water, and even if normally you're not careful about washing your hands before you eat, let's say a pickle, for example, nevertheless, the commentaries say that a person should be careful to wash their hands at the Seder night, which is a custom that we all do today. The reason is because since this dipping is being done as part of the Seder, it is far more significant and far more prestigious than when you're sitting by you're sitting by a barbecue, you're sitting with your friends watching a game, and you eat a pickle or you eat some olives, or we're sitting in olive oil. It's much more of a casual environment. It's not so important. But if you're sitting at a seder where everything you do is exact and planned and predetermined, the dipping of the vegetables is much more prestigious. Therefore, you wash your hands. In addition to the second reason why we wash our hands before dipping the vegetable in the water, even though many religious Jews are not careful about this during the year, and that is because this night is all about arousing questions. And therefore, the very fact that you are doing something different than you would normally do, this itself lends itself to the additional question that the child asks you, tell me, please, why are we dipping? Why are we washing our hands a second time? Why are we dipping this vegetable into salt water? Normally, the beginning of a meal begins with bread and dipping bread into salt, not with a vegetable into salt water. So please, Daddy dear, explain to me, why are we doing this? This is what we call the Manashtana, which God willing I will get into in great detail on a Wednesday night. Please do join us. And therefore, it's a good thing to do this to arouse the curiosity of the child, even if it's not something you plan on doing um, again during the year. That's just the halachic interesting details of the second step of the Seder, of washing our hands for karpas. Again, I personally think it's fascinating how this year, due to the coronavirus and the unbelievable awareness of the transfer of germs and the ability of someone's hands touching something and that thing transferring the germs to something else, you see that idea thousands of years before science understood it. You see it in the dipping, in the washing of our hands in the Seder before the dipping of the vegetable in the water. Which parenthetically, I spoke about this in Shul our last time we had services, so a week ago, a week and a half ago, how in the Black Plague, the Jews were blamed for the Black Plague. And why was that? Because the Jews had a significantly less, proportionately, although Jews also died in the Black Plague, but I guess proportionately, the number of non-Jewish neighbors that died, relatively speaking, less Jews died. And the reason for that is not because it was the Jews that created the Black Plague and the wells of poisoned the wells of of our Christian neighbors, but it's for the very simple reason that the Jews had these laws of hygiene, laws of mikvah and washing themselves before Shabbos, but also these basic laws of washing your hands before you eat bread, or washing your hand before you eat a watery or liquidy food. These basic laws, then they didn't use forks so much as we do today. These laws had a tremendous effect on the simple prevention of the spread of germs and illness amongst the Jewish people. And so when you sit by your Seder this year and you dip that vegetable in the salt water, after having washed your hands, you can feel proud knowing that the Torah has wisdom and the rabbis using the Torah had wisdom that preceded the scientific and the medical community by literally thousands of years. I think that's a beautiful thought in and of itself. Parenthetically, only because I mentioned it, and I said on Shabbos, I think it's good to know. People are curious. Talking about the coronavirus for a quick minute. Sadly, the Jewish community is being very hard hit by the coronavirus today. I saw in Antwerp, in Belgium, a doctor spoke. I think he said, I think it was Antwerp. with Antwerp. He said that the Jewish community, 6% of the cases in the Jewish community of the coronavirus in Antwerp are the Jewish community, and they're only like 0.02% of the population of that city. And the reason I think that it's a beautiful thing about the Jewish people. The Jewish people are a nation today that is more socially integrated. We have a stronger community fabric, which obviously has the danger of allowing germs to spread quicker. But we get together in shul. We get together for family simchas. We come over to each other's homes. The integration and the community connection that exists among the Jewish community, thankfully, even though we live in a time where people are more and more socially distant from each other, and people are more and more disconnected one from the other, nevertheless, the Jewish community were much more of a, with the downside that we therefore, share the germs more easily as well. Anyway, that was also a side note. Good evening to all of you that are commenting on Facebook, saying hello to me. I appreciate it. Good evening to each and every one of you. To Andrea, to Lisa, I can't see further up. Thank you all for messaging. Okay, let us get to the feature presentation of what I wanted to speak about tonight, which is karpas. So I'm sure you all know what karpas is. Karpas is where we take a vegetable. It could be any vegetable. There's no requirement what vegetable it should be. Some people have a custom to use like parsley, etc., because it's a spring. The Chabad custom is specifically to use an underground vegetable, which is either an onion or a potato. So usually we have potatoes, and if you want to be really, bitter, you use an onion. But any vegetable that's a vegetable from the ground is fine for the sake of this purpose. We dip it into salt. We make the blessing, Bore Pri Adama, the blessing on eating a vegetable. We have in mind when we're eating it that this blessing will also apply for the eating of the maror, the bitter herb that we're going to eat later on. After we eat the matzah, we're going to eat the maror. We have in mind this is for the maror as well. And that's why we eat only a little bit of karpas. Because if you eat more than a kizayis, more than the amount of an olive, not today's olive, but a much larger size olive, you might be required to make an after blessing. We don't want to do that. So we eat a small little piece. We have in mind that this is the blessing for the maror. We'll eat later on as well. And we dip it in the salt water. The salt water reminds us of the tears of our forefathers who were slaves in Egypt. Following that, we go to the breaking of the metal matzah, and then the telling of the story of Pesach, which, God willing, we will discuss. I have some beautiful ideas I want to share with you, God willing, over the next few days this week and the next week as well. Bezrat Hashem Yifrach. The first question is why? Why do we dip the vegetable in the salt water? Why do we do this custom of karpas? You know why? Because we want to make you ask why. If the child was to ask you why, I mean, that if. Manishtana, what's one of the questions in Manishtana? And all other nights we dip only one time. Doesn't say bread and salt, but one time. Tonight, tonight we dip two times. Once the vegetable in the salt water, once the maror and the charosas. So why are we dipping so many times at tonight's meal? So they're asking the question. What's the answer to the question? Anyone that's watching me now, do you know what is the answer to the question? Why indeed do we dip two times? I mean, there are spiritual answers, but on a very simplistic level, why do we dip two times? And the answer, I'm not going to wait by myself in silence. The answer is that we're dipping in order to make you ask why. That's the whole point. And when the kid says, what's the answer? You say, so you'll ask questions. Well, what's the answer? So you'll ask questions. Meaning, there's a beautiful idea over here. The best answer you can teach your child is to know that not all questions have answers. Not all questions have answers. Some of the questions in life are not answerable. They're good questions. They're valid questions. They're important questions. And they will remain as questions. And that's fine. On my family WhatsApp, So I have a family WhatsApp group, and last night we were discussing the Pesach Seder, the community Pesach Seder. And I'm going to be very honest. I'm in denial. I'll say it as it is. I am living in denial that I will not be able to have a community Seder and have a table with 30, 40 guests. I'm the second in my home. It's to have, for us, Pesach. There has never been a Pesach in my life that I wasn't surrounded with many, many Jews sharing, celebrating together, sharing words of Torah, sharing inspirational messages, growing in our Judaism together. I've never in my life experienced, not as a kid, not as a teenager, not when I was in South Africa and elsewhere. I could share stories on my Pesach that I spent in South Africa on the next to Kruger Park. No matter where I was, surrounded by Jews together, to, to imagine that we're going to have a Pesach. I'll sit at home with my family and not have a Pesach, and I might sneak in a few guests because I know some people that are single that might need a place to go. I can't, whatever, but actually even saying it on record, but I'm going to cheat because I can't imagine having a Pesach without people. I'm in denial. The last night we're talking about it, and I'm sharing with my family, my siblings, how could it make sense? There's people that I know that are counting on me for a Seder. There are people that for every year we're here for many years. I've taken care of their Pesach. We've provided the food, we provided the inspiration, we provided the experience. This is part of why we're here. This is part of what I live for, to be able to share Pesach with other Jews. And now we can't do it. We can't do it. So how could it be? So we're discussing back and forth if we can help people make their own Pesach arrangements, and if I know people that come to Seder that won't make a Seder on their own, even if I got them the food, not interested, and we what I was saying, teach them how to do it. So my wise brother-in-law says the question makes no sense. That how could it be that Hashem is creating a situation where Jews whose only Yiddishkeit is at a Pesach Seder? There are many Jews who are very, very minimally involved Jewishly. They don't normally go to classes. They don't normally go to shul. They don't normally keep kosher. But a Pesach Seder they go and they have a Pesach Seder with matzah and wine and all that. And that God should take away from them their Pesach experience. How could it be? So their connection to Him to be taken away. And guess what? There's no answer, as we were discussing this last night. And I think my mother wrote, the question is a question that it's a good question. There'll never be a good answer. The lack of an answer doesn't mean that there's a problem. You can ask a question, and the question is a question, and we go on living. We go on living. Reminded of a story that just popped in my head in a second. I remember the details. Rabbi Yisrael Lau shares a story that he remembers in Auschwitz, in Srebrenica, I don't remember, and they had a Pesach Seder, or they gathered on Pesach, and one of the guards came that night, knowing it was Pesach. I don't remember the exact details, like making up stories, but the basic idea, the gist of the story, the moral of the story, is that there was the Nazis killed a bunch of people, and they turned to God, and listen. Eli Wiesel tells the story. Eli Wiesel tells the story that they put God on trial. He has a book, God on Trial. It's officially a fictional book, but it's actually not a fictional story. It's actually based on a real experience that Eli Wiesel, he himself witnessed firsthand happening in the camps. And they put God on trial, and they declared God guilty. The rabbis made a court, and they ruled that God is guilty for whatever crimes, whatever exactly was the charges of murder, of neglecting his children. They found God guilty. And they asked Eli Wiesel, and what happened after they finished the court case? And they got up, the crowd that was gathered around for this court case, put God on trial. The rabbis, the scholars that were there, that had the courage and the audacity to declare God guilty, they got up and they davened Ma'ariv. They prayed to God. You can declare God guilty, You can say, God, what in the universe are you doing to me? It makes no sense. I feel like I'm drowning in the salt water. I feel overwhelmed. My eyes are burning from the salt water. I can't breathe. I'm choking on the salt water. I feel like any second the water will enter my lungs and I'll die. God, what? What? And yet, there's no answer to the question, why do we dip this vegetable in the salt water? The only reason why we dip the vegetable in the salt water so we can ask, why do we dip the vegetable in the salt water? It's a question we're creating for no other reason than for the sake of creating a question. I hope I'm doing justice to this very, very important idea. All of us have times in our life when we have questions. Now is a time in life when all of us have questions because you can't be a sensitive human being today and watch people dying or being ill, to watch people who are afraid. I'm speaking to a lot of people. People are afraid. People are in panic. So even people that are not sick, Baruch Hashem, emotionally, I don't use the word they're sick. That sounds too strong. But emotionally, they're not in a good place. Emotionally, they're stressed out. They're worried. They're anxious. And you say, God, why? Why do these people need to be afraid? Why do people need to be hurting financially? You know how many people have lost their jobs? You know how many people are hurting, that are afraid, even if they didn't lose their job or they're temporarily out of work, even if they're working, but there's a lot of uncertainty. For us in the shul, it's a scary time a little bit. There's no money coming. There's nothing happening here. And why? What's the answer? There's no answer. Nowhere in the Haggadah do we ever answer the question that the child asks, "Ma nishtana halayla hazeh?" Dear Father, please tell me. "B'chol haleilos nalmad bilin afilu pamechas halayla hazeh shtei pamim." That's the Yiddish too. I mean, there's a song too. Yiddish, all the nights we dip, or maybe one time. Tonight we dip two times. And what's the answer? You don't need to have an answer. So someone, Ari, who's a big tzaddik, wants to know, is it okay for us to challenge God, or we have to work on emunah? So we have no. The emunah is not in my reach, but the question is, as a Jew, is it okay to challenge God? So I didn't understand the second sentence, but the first sentence is a very, very loaded, powerful question. It's a good question, so we'll deal with it for a second. I'll repeat. Is it okay for us to challenge God, or do we have to work on our faith? That we have we have no questions. You say? The answer is just explaining that challenging God and believing in God is not a question. It's not a fiction. Should I go off subject a little bit? It's good. You don't make a lot of conversation. Off subject a little bit. Talking about the Holocaust, Eli Wiesel. The whole question people ask, how could the Holocaust happen? Why would God allow the Holocaust to happen? Then, based on that question, they come to a conclusion and they say, "It can't be a God. I don't believe in God. I don't believe that there can be a God. There's a Holocaust that happens." It's a good question, right? Seemingly, seems like a good question. How could God allow the Holocaust to happen? Obviously, there's no God. That question only begins if you first accept the premise that number one, there is a God. Number two, you accept not only that there's a God, but there's a God who's in control of everything that happens. Because if there's a God in heaven, and then he kind of left the world to its own devices, so who cares? I can believe that there's a God who created the universe, but he's not in control of what happens here on a day-to-day level. So it means nothing. So number one, you believe that God is in charge. Number two, you believe that he's directing and controlling and directing every single step of the day, every single person, every single thing that happens in the universe is under his direct intervention and control. And number three, you believe that that God is a fundamentally good, fair, proper, just God. And only when you accept that there's a God, and you accept that that God is controlling and directing everything that happens, and you accept that this God is the nature of good and the ultimate of good, and the teva of tov, the nature of good is to do good, Now you have a question, how could the Holocaust happen? Which means that if you don't believe in God, then there's no challenge. What are you challenging? If you don't believe in a God, then there's no question. Life is random. Can you ask why some people win the lottery, some people don't? There's no question why. It's random. It's random. Only ask a question if you believe. So going back to the question that you asked is it okay to challenge God or do I have to believe? You can challenge God as long our belief is bedrock. Our belief will never waver for a second. Will never waver for a second. When you challenge out of belief, that's fine. The Rebbe himself challenged God. The Rebbe himself challenged God. The Rebbe himself, so to say, is one extremely, extremely, extreme day is the day that the Rebbe had his stroke in 1992. The day that the Rebbe was praying for all of us at the gravesite. Rebbe, you see right here in the picture behind me, he was praying at the gravesite of his Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, and while he was there davening, he had a stroke, and from that stroke, he, in a physical sense, never recovered. And again, in 1994, the Rebbe had a second stroke on the exact same day, which is today, the 27th day of Adar. Um, and so, with that being said, shortly before the Rebbe's stroke, there was a young woman in Crown Heights who was sadly followed into her home by a non-person who raped her and murdered her in front of one of her young children. And if you were to hear the words the Rebbe used, not just the pain in the Rebbe's voice, but the 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 the, the language of the sikh that the Rebbe spoke, the talk of the Rebbe after that incident happened in the Chabad community in Crown Heights, that was like a shocking incident. Sharp words. Now, the Rebbe never for a second lost his faith in God when he was challenging God. In fact, it's only when you believe that you can really ask the ultimate question. Like Moshe is standing before because I believe that's why I have a challenge. Why do your kids suddenly get so upset? Or why do you sometimes get so upset by your kids? Because they're so important to you. That's why. That's why it hurts so much. Because I believe in God so strongly. That's why it bothers me. How could God allow the suffering that the world is experiencing right now? I hope that answers your question. Okay. Point is, this is a very, very important point. I had a drink on the table, but I don't. Um, the point is that this is a very important element of Jewish education. That Judaism is not just to teach our children the answers. That's the modern day school system. The modern day school system is just to feed information to your kids. Real education, Jewish education, is not to feed your children information. Real education is to teach your children how to ask and to teach them to ask even if they don't get the answer. Life is a journey. It's not about the destination. The study of Torah is not just about knowing information. The study of Torah is not just about knowing facts and being able to pass a test. It's a journey. And the journey is a beauty in and of itself. Beauty in and of itself. The life of a Jew is not just about the destination. A Jew can never say, oh, I know all the answers. You can never say, I reached perfection. I know everything. I have the answer. If you think you have the answer, you have to recognize that life is a journey of a question. And there's questions that are deliberately created just for the sake of the question, because God wants us to turn towards Him. God wants us to say, God, God, are you listening? What are you thinking? What are you thinking? What are you thinking? Why are you making your Jews crazy? Why are you making all the world crazy, not just the Jews? Why are you making your children? Why are you making the universe? Why are you making humanity? Why are you making them a sugar? Why are you scaring them? Why are you frightening them? Why are you letting people get sick and to be in hospitals and to die, God forbid? Already two Chabad rabbis. That's one point of karpas. Another point of karpas, l'chaim. Another point of karpas. Why do we dip the vegetable in the salt water? The word karpas, which means a vegetable or greens, if you read the word karpas backwards, the word karpas is spelled kaf, the letter chaf, reish, pei, samach. That's how you spell it, 4 letters. Chaf, reish, pei, samach. If you read that backwards, it was spelled samach, which is a numerical value. The numerical value of samach is 60, or in this case, a reference to the Shishim Riba, the 600,000 Jewish souls who had to serve the Egyptians with perech. The first 3 letters right backwards is pei, reish, chaf, which spells perech, which means back-breaking labor, or spirit-breaking labor. Because the work of the Jews was not just hard labor. It was a perech. It was hard. It was spirit-breaking labor. It was demoralizing labor. The work the Egyptians made the Jews do was not just work. You can work hard. You're sweating and you're sweating and you're schwitzing but you finish and you lean back and say, I did a good job. We're doing construction next door, doing renovations. I was speaking to the tile installer, did a beautiful, beautiful job installing the tile. Unfortunately, I don't even see what's going on because I'm not talking about it now with everything else going on, but there's construction happening in Shul. So they installed the tile, we're talking about how hard it is. They're big tiles, they're 24 by 48 inch tiles. They're big tiles. It's hard work. The guy tells me, but I enjoy what I do. It's hard work. Gets paid well for it, but it's hard work. But afterwards you feel good. You look at a finished floor and the finished product, and there's a certain satisfaction. The work of the Jews in Egypt was spirit-breaking labor. It was perech. Why was it perech? Because the Egyptians made the Jews do work that was meaningless. They would make them build pyramids on quicksand, and when they were finished, by the time they finished building the entire pyramid, the weight would make the quicksand open, and the entire pyramid would crumble, and then they would go build it again in the same spot on the same quicksand that they had just witnessed the pyramid they built being destroyed, building it again. Purely demoralizing labor for no sake other than to demoralize and dehumanize the Jewish people. In many ways, many similarities to the Holocaust. So that's the word karpas. But I'm going to show you a beautiful question. Why a vegetable for karpas and not a fruit? If the whole reason why we're dipping this vegetable in the salt water is just in order to confuse the child, to make him ask a question by the Manishtana that's coming up in a few pages, to ask why are we dipping vegetables in salt water instead of washing our hands for a motzi and eating the meal, eating the bread, or in this case, eating the matzah. She's going to ask the question. So in order to make him ask the question, we're doing something out of the ordinary by eating a vegetable in water before the meal, little appetizer, like a fancy appetizer. It's very, very tiny. You go to a fancy restaurant, they give you a tiny little thing, tiny little appetizer. Have to be a vegetable in salt water. Why not a fruit in salt water? So let me share with you a few interesting ideas of fruit. Tree stands above the ground. Here's a symbol of strength. Whereas the vegetable, at best, is on a little bush, or otherwise, it's literally lying on the ground. It may even be a vegetable below ground, covered in the dirt, underground vegetables. Number 2, trees last for many, many years. And if you have a season where the tree doesn't produce, that's no problem. You have next year another season, and the tree will produce. Whereas vegetables, they last for one season, and then they die out, and a new bush or a new plant grows. Number 3, that fruits are a dessert; they're a delicacy. Whereas vegetables are a staple of a healthy diet. Beautiful lesson for us. Beautiful lesson that as follows. You may come to your Seder table and you may feel like a vegetable. You may feel like you're underground. You may feel like you're a root, like you haven't produced anything this season. You may feel like you haven't accomplished anything. You feel like a failure, that you don't have no pride. You're not standing up tall. You're lying on the ground, or you're buried in the dirt, and you're, Jackie Mason says it's a hug, it's a cackle, you all on the floor. We start the vegetable, we start to say that with a vegetable to say that even if you feel like you're on the ground like a vegetable, you should know that Pesach night has the power, has the ability to elevate us into a beautiful Seder experience. That's the vegetable. Fruits are beautiful. Fruits are dessert. A vegetable that's on the ground, you feel like you're a vegetable. As we're going to see in a second, you also have a very important part in the Seder experience. So what do we do with this vegetable? Make a blessing. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, borei pri ha'adam. Which means, help me out. Someone tell me what does borei pri ha'adam mean? Who brought forth fruit from the earth, from the ground. And here we come to the real beautiful idea I want to share with you tonight. The main course of tonight's class. The soul of the karpas. There's the body and there's the soul. The body of karpas. The reason why we dip the karpas in salt water is the child asks questions, which also is an important message. But now we're going to get to the spiritual dimension, the spiritual lesson for us, the spiritual teaching of dipping specifically a vegetable in the ground. That's as follows. Man is called Adam. I'm sure you're all familiar with the birth of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. And man is called Adam. Why is man called Adam? Even woman, even the Chava, whose Eve is also included, all ladies are included in the general category of man, which is called in Hebrew. Adam is a human being. Why is a human being called Adam? The simple reason is because we come from the Adama, come from the ground. Just like the vegetable is called a fruit of the ground, a Adama, a fruit of the earth, because it grows in the dirt. So too, the human being, how was man created? As the Torah, the Bible in Genesis says that God gathered earth from all over the world. He gathered earth from all different places so that wherever a person will be buried, they will be buried in a location from where their body originally came from. And then God makes water to make the mold of a man. And then God breathes into his nostrils the breath of life. Meaning that the body of man comes from the earth, from dirt. So just like a fruit, just like a vegetable is a fruit of the Adama, so too the body of the human being is the fruit of the ground. Adam from Adama. There's another reason why human beings are called Adam. The Shalah HaKadosh, the Shalah says, Yitzchak Levi Horowitz explains that there's another reason why we're called Adam. Because we are Adame La'elyon. The word Adama, ground, if you change the vowels, the same letters, but change the vowels, instead of meaning earth, means Adame, that we are Doma, we are similar, we are compared La'elyon to the great one above to God. Meaning there's two reasons why we're called Adam. One reason why humans are called an Adam or Adam is because we come from the ground, from the Adama. A second reason why we're called Adam is because we are similar, we are dome, we are comparable to God, to our Maker and our Creator. So which one is it? Are we called man because we're from the dirt, which is a very low thing? Or are we called man because we're from a very high place, from God? And they're both true. They're both true. Reminds me of a great joke. This young boy is writing up a family history for school, doing a project or a mitzvah, whatever, for school on a project on his family origins. So he comes to his father and says, "Tell me, Dad, where do we come from?" Father wants to show off his brilliance to his son and starts to explain to his son, once upon a time there were little atoms, and then they evolved, and there was evolution. So eventually there was apes, and then the apes also had an evolution until eventually we evolved from the apes, from the monkeys to the whole series, and we still walk on four. And that's where we come from. We come from apes and monkeys. Okay. He goes to his mother. He says, "Mom, I'm working on a project for school about our family history. Tell me, where do we come from originally? My son, where do we come from? We come from God. We come from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God Himself, who created us from the earth of the ground. God created us and He made us. And He breathed into our nostrils the breath of life. We're the children of God. He says, I don't understand. Dad told me we come from monkeys, from apes. You're telling me we come from God Himself. So which one is it? Oh, my son, it's not. They're both true. Your father is talking about his side of the family, and I'm talking about my side of the family. Where do we come from? Are we Adam because we're Adama, we're from the earth? Or are we Adam because we're Adam al because we come from God? And what's the answer? They're both true. They're both true. We are not one-dimensional people. We do not operate on one level of reality. We have the body of us, as I'm sure many of you are familiar with this idea, and one of the foundational principles of the entire Hasidic philosophy. That part of us is our nefesh habahamis, our human soul or our natural soul, which is the regular part of us that makes us function as healthy human beings. And the fact that a person has the desire to take care of himself and to eat and to sleep and to be successful, and that we can become scientists and doctors and healthcare professionals and invent vaccines and build buildings and become biologists. All that comes from the nefesh habahamis, the animal soul, which is a very bad translation. The human natural soul is the right word. The natural soul of the person that allows our bodies to flourish the way God made them to be. But there's a whole other element to us. The other side of the person is our godly soul, our divine dimension. So we have what's called a nefesh elokis. We have the body that God made from the earth, but we have the soul that God breathed into our nostrils. And that soul is altruistic, that soul is idealistic, that soul desires nothing for itself. All that soul wants is to spiritually elevate itself, to cleave to God, to be elevated in heaven, to go up to Shemayim, to be holy, to study Torah, to pray, to do good deeds. That's all the soul. So which one are we? Are we primarily driven and directed and defined by the body of us that is called Adam because we come from earth? Or are we driven and motivated and acting based on the divine soul that God blew into our nostrils? And that part of us is the Adam, is called man because we are similar to our Creator in heaven. We are created and we're born with the potential of both. We're born with the potential to be a great, wonderful, holy, spiritual person, similar, Adam el similar to God, to behave in the way that God behaves. That's true. Smells, illness, sense not effective. We have the ability to act in the ways of God. And like the Talmud says that just like God is kind and compassionate, we should be kind and compassionate. Just like God went to visit the sick, we should visit the sick, visit Avram, etc., etc., etc. Or we have the potential to be not so great, be animalistic, self-centered, materialistic, bodily centered human beings. Which one will we be? That's our choice. That's our choice. I'll another great story. I don't know if it's true. It's probably a joke. It's only these stories, good story. It's a good message for sure. One day, this couple comes to the rabbi and they say, Rabbi, we're having a big issue, having a big marital dilemma. What's the just gave birth to a healthy baby boy and soon is going to breast. However, we can't decide what to name the baby. We need help. I'm going to find. Okay, so he says, the rabbi says to the woman, tell me, what do you want to name the rat? What do you want to name your child? I want to name him Moshe. Who's Moshe? She said, Moshe is my father. I want to name him after my father. My father was a tzaddik. Father was the most dedicated, loyal, devoted Jew. Every morning at the crack of dawn, he would go to the synagogue to pray. He would be sitting for hours in the shul davening with his thousand tefillin. He was the most honest person, the most generous person. Every Shabbos we would have guests. He would invite all the poor people home to feed them. He was my father. Hello, Randy. Good to see you. He said my father was a holy person. My father was a tzaddik. I want to name my child, my son, out of the name of my illustrious father Moshe. Okay. Rabbi turns to the father, says, what do you want to name your son? Says, I want to name the son after my father. What's his name? Moshe. Says, Moshe, what's the problem? The woman says, I am no way naming my kid after that scoundrel. My father-in-law, he was a crook. He was a self-centered piece of you know what. He lied through his teeth. He didn't know how to say an honest word if you would pay him. He was a scumbag. He was a scoundrel. He was a scam artist. He was a liar. And she goes on for a rant only for 10 minutes. What kind of a low-life scam artist this her father-in-law Moshe was. Well, finally, she finishes, and the man turns to the rabbi and says, listen, I'm married long enough. I'm not going to argue with her about who my father was. But at the end of the day, he was my father. Passed away. No one's named after him. I want to name my son after my father. Rabbi says, such a dilemma I've never had before. Let me go think about it. He goes into his room to go study the holy books, and he thinks and he meditates. Finally, after 20 minutes, he comes back out to the waiting room with the waiting. I have a solution for you. I know what you should name your kid by the bris. So what? You should name him Moshe. Oh, Moshe. Brilliant. But which Moshe? My father Moshe or his father Moshe? Rabbi says, that we'll wait and see when he grows up. When he grows up, then we'll know. He will tell us which Moshe was he named after. The boy himself, through his actions, will reveal to us, was he named after your father Moshe, the righteous, holy, generous, kind, beautiful, soul-spirited, beautiful Moshe? Or will his actions tell us that he was named after the self-centered, self-serving, dishonest, etc., Moshe? This is the question me and you need to ask ourselves as we're starting the Seder experience, as we're on this 15-step journey out of slavery into freedom, out of psychological slavery, as we discussed already, out of psychological bondage, where we feel constrained and limited and unable to break free. And we want to get out of that bondage, go free of that and become free people. Not just free in the sense that we don't have a boss over our head, but free in the sense that we're truly free to express our identity. The question that we need to ask ourselves is, what kind of Adam will I be? What kind of Adam will I be? This brings us to the dipping of the vegetable in salt. The vegetable is a borei pri ha'adam. The vegetable is the fruit of the earth. However, what do we do with that vegetable? What kind of elevation will we do with that vegetable or not? You see, there's two things we can do with the body. We can either take the body, the Adama, the earth that was created, our body was created from, and allow it to overwhelm us and to define us. And we identify by our body. We view ourselves from a bodily perspective, and the way we decide, the way we function in our lives is purely from a materialistic, bodily perspective. Or we have the choice to break out of the body, not to break out, to elevate the body, to transform the body, because the body is not something to break. Side note, but important note, the body is not something negative that has to be broken. The body of a Jew is holy. It's the vessel for the soul of God. But have to not worship the body. You have to use the body as a vessel in which to worship God. The famous teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, when you see the donkey of your friend, the word donkey of your friend, chamor, kamina, is the same Hebrew word for donkey, chamor. It's chomer, which means materialistic, power, object, materialistic object. You see the chomer, when you see the material body of your enemy, of the Yetzer Hara, on the side of the road, and you want to ignore it, you should surely help it and uplift it, except I'm getting distracted. The point is the body is important, as long as you don't worship it. Many people today get so carried away in the body that their whole identity is their body. How much do I weigh? How good do I look? You need to take care of your body. I mean, this is an important point, especially for today. Sometimes you need to not go to a shul and not do something religious or something spiritual to take care of your body. But that's only so your body can be healthy, so you can serve God with your body. When you stop serving God because you're too busy serving your body and all you care about is you're turning your body into an idol, then you get a whole other problem. It's not for tonight's class, but that's an important discussion to have one day. The point is, going back to what we were saying, when a person takes his vegetable, representing the body, and he wants to break free, he wants to transform his body into something holy, you got to dip it in the water. What is water? That is a very famous saying of the Talmud, Ein mayim ela Torah, which means that there's no water except for Torah. There's many stories in many places where we see this idea that Torah is compared to water. Why is Torah compared to water? Because just like the nature of water is to flow downwards, water doesn't remain stagnant. Water flows down. So to the wisdom of God was created, that God wanted his wisdom not to remain above, but to flow down. And just like water is the source of all life, so too Torah is the source of all life. Sure, you know the story of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was a man of 40 years old, and he was an ignoramus. He did not know how to read Hebrew. He didn't know how to pray. He didn't know anything about Jewish law, Jewish customs, or Jewish holidays. So much so that Rabbi Akiva said that if you were to give me a scholar, I would tear him apart with my bare hands. That's how much he despised Torah study. Rabbi Akiva was married to an unbelievably righteous, special, amazing woman. Her name was Rachel. Just like I am blessed to be married to a truly special woman who helps me develop my potential and my abilities to serve God with the talents that God gave me. Rabbi Akiva's wife Rachel saw that he was not utilizing the gifts that God gave him. And Rachel would lovingly, patiently, because women don't nudge their husbands ever. No Jewish woman would ever nudge her husband. But in the way that only a wise Jewish woman can do, she began to transform her husband's view on life. She saw the potential he had. She saw what kind of diamond, unpolished, but what kind of diamond he could be. And like a wise woman, I tell this woman all the time, wise women always know how to change their husband's mind if they do it right. If they do it right. Can't nudge. You gotta be smart about it. She's changed her husband's view on life. And Rabbi Akiva wanted to become a scholar. He wanted to go and study Torah. But he said to himself, it's too late. If I would be young, if I would have grown up like the rabbi and grown up religious, if my parents would have taught me, then I would, I'm jealous of it, but it's not for me. Too late to change my life. Any of you that are watching me tonight ever have this idea pop into your head? I wish I could be different, but it's too late for me to change now. If you've ever thought that, you're in good company. First of all, I've also thought it. We all think it. It's one of the many, many excuses of the Yetzer Hara. But it's Rabbi Akiva also thought it. So you're in good company. The difference is that Rabbi Akiva was willing to change when he saw the opportunity. One day Rabbi Akiva was walking and he saw water dripping on the rock. And the water was steadily dripping. Drip, drop, drip, drop. Water was dripping. And the power of the consistency of the water dripping had made a hole in the rock under the water, under where the water was dripping. Akiva said to himself, if water penetrates a hard rock, how much more so can the water of Torah, because Torah is compared to water, as I just mentioned, can the water of Torah penetrate my head and my heart, which is not made out of stone. It may be a little bit dense, but it's not stone, and it's never too late. And he went away to yeshiva, and from that, because he didn't buy into the narrative that his life was unchangeable, he transformed his life completely. Torah is compared to water. You have a vegetable, the vegetable in the body of the person. You want to transform that vegetable into something different. You want to take that vegetable out of its own bondage, out of its own shackles, of its own psychological limitations, out of its own mindset of I can't. Whoever here said I can't, I hope you're listening. You want to break free from the words I can't. Dip the body into the Torah. Submerge the vegetable in the water. The water is Torah. Because in Torah, Torah is Makor Chaim. Torah is the water of life. The Mayim Chaim, sorry. Torah makes us live. Not just Torah makes us live. Torah is our life. As we say, it's another story came to my head. It's very much connected. Also, the Rabbi Akiva and Torah being our water. So Rabbi Akiva was living in the time of the Romans. And the Romans told Rabbi Akiva, the Romans made a decree you're not allowed to study Torah in public. That's what Rabbi Akiva did. He kept on teaching Torah in public. He was ready to risk his life. Unlike today, we're closing the yeshivas and the shuls, not because the government is not stopping Torah, because God has made a decree against people gathering. This is from God for health reasons, not for persecution. Please continue. They'll kill you. So Rabbi Akiva said to his friend, let me respond to your concern with the river. And the father, the fish were swimming back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So he said to the fish, where are you swimming to? So the fish, there's a fisherman Shabbos table. We're swimming away the fisherman. So Rabbi Akiva said to the fish, the fox says to the fish, if it's dangerous in the water, come with me, I'll protect you. Come on my back, I'll take you to my little fox, to my little cave where there's no fishermen, and there you'll be safe. The fish say to the fox, they call you the wise fox. You're a foolish creature. Don't you understand that if we stay in the water, maybe the fishermen will catch us and maybe we won't. But if we leave the city of the water and go with you to your cave, is our life. If we leave Torah, we'll surely die. Even when we're not gathering together, that's why we're learning more. That's why I'm spending time every day to prepare a class to learn with you so we can have more Torah. Do you know I'm still setting my alarm? Someone inspired me. Even though I don't have to get up for minyan anymore now, theoretically I can have a anytime I want. My alarm still goes off, and I still get up, even though I was tired. Even on Sunday morning, and this morning, I know I have a cover, I have a study session, my own private study session, and that's continuing. Our Torah, we shall surely. I wanted to say one last point. The idea of dipping the vegetable in the salt water, in Hebrew, to dip is tovel. We say tovel, tibul. Tibul means to dip. Those same letters for the word to dip are the same letters as the word bittul, which means nullification or to negate. Meaning, normally, when you submerge something inside something else, what happens? You're nullifying and submerging and minimizing the thing that you're submerging. So normally the act of tibul, of dipping, of submerging yourself, is an act of bittul, it's an act of nullification, an act of humbling yourself. normally. However, man, you call halaylos. Why is this night different than all other nights? You know why this night is different? Because this night, as we already explained regarding the matzah and regarding some of the different objects on the Seder plate, the same is true over here as well. That our dipping can be a sign of negation and humility and of being nullified into salt water, into bitterness, etc. Or it could also be a sign of riches. You know, one of the signs of riches that before you eat the meal, you have an appetizer. Ever go to a fancy wedding or to a fancy dinner? You know, you go to a fancy restaurant. They bring around an appetizer before you get a little vegetable, a little celery, or a little, whatever it is. You dip it into some sauce. You get a little piece of hamburger, a little piece of pargiot, whatever they give you. You dip it into some sauce. It's an appetizer. It's not a meal. It's a pre-meal, the pre-game, pre-game. Sign of wealth, sign of luxury, a sign of wealth. Meaning, it's I'm drowning. That's one way. Or you can be like a fish in the water. A fish does not feel like it's drowning in the water. A fish feels alive in the water. Not just it feels alive. It is alive. It's living from the water. That's the beauty of the fish. This is our story for us tonight from the Karpas. Karpas is when we feel like we're losing and we feel like a vegetable. It's low on the ground. It's not feeling fulfilled. It's feeling like a vegetable on the ground, not like a fruit, not like a tree. Go into the water of Torah, and the water of Torah will transform you. The water of Torah will give you life that you may never have known you had. That's tonight's thing. I wanted to say for 1 minute, I was going to speak about Yachatz. Yachatz is breaking in the matzah because I want to go through all the steps of the Seder. God willing, tomorrow night, please join us tomorrow night's class. Tomorrow night's class will be really, I think, something new that you've never heard before on the very introduction to the telling of the story. And we're going to hopefully be able to make it relevant to today. It's about inviting guests to your Seder, and we'll talk about it tomorrow night. Before that, there's a step called Yachatz. So just for the sake of not skipping any steps, we'll spend 1 minute on the breaking of the middle matzah. I'll share with you a beautiful thought, which is one of the thoughts from the Kutzker Rebbe that I think is beautiful. I say it all the time. Kutzker Rebbe said, just so you know, the middle matzah, we break the middle matzah. The larger half is hidden for the afikomen, and the smaller half is left on the table to be the poor man's bread, just like a poor man when they don't know where the next meal will come from. They hide the bigger piece, they eat the smaller piece. So too, that's the breaking of the middle matzah. The Kutzker Rebbe said, there is nothing as straight as a crooked ladder. There is nothing as crooked as a gleichwertel, which means a smooth, slick, sly, dishonest, statement. There's nothing as dark, as black, as white linen shrouds, and there's nothing as wholesome as a broken heart. Yachatz is the broken matzah, the broken heart. As we already explained, so I'm not going to repeat it. Only when you're broken are you vessel to receive the new light of the freedom that we are experiencing on Pesach. B'ezrat Hashem, tonight we will talk about the introduction to the telling of a story. Because till now it's all been ritual. We'll talk about the introduction of the main body of the Magid, of the telling of the story. Please join me tomorrow night, 7:30 p.m. for another class. My dear friends, as always, if you need help with something, if you need to talk, reach out to me. I'm here for you.